Welcome everybody to our Thursday, August 3rd, 2017 Forest Lake Area Schools School Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Way to go! Getting it.
Welcome everybody to our school board meeting. If you're new to a school board meeting, there's information over on the table about what we're trying to accomplish here. If you have anything you'd like to speak on, any agenda items you'd like to speak on, you can fill out a green card and get it to me right away, and I'll let you speak up to 3 minutes at the scheduled and unscheduled visitor section. Member Clerk, could you please take a roll call?
Member Corcoran? Here. Member Rapheal?
Here.
Member Olson is here. Member Peterson?
Here.
Member Moorhead? Here. Member Odegaard?
Here.
And Member Tyson?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. All right, scheduled and unscheduled visitors. Member Corcoran, do you have a...
Yeah, we just had a nice discussion. Allison from Flea was there, and we had just discussion about just things, all the great things going on in the district. So it's a positive conversation. That's pretty much
nice.
it.
All right, student achievement, 8th grade building. J.P. Jacobson.
So if I can do a quick introduction to the topic. This past school year, the strategic planning team developed a strategy to address the transition of 7th and 8th grade students to one building and 9th graders moving to the high school. One of the action items related to this strategy was to develop the educational model for the 7-8 building. A committee comprised of teachers and administrators from both the Century and Southwest was formed to develop this educational model. This team met for four-hour sessions beginning with the first week of the summer and has done impressive work to develop the educational model that will serve as a framework for the new 7-8 building. J.P. Jacobson, principal at both Century and Southwest, along with Kim McDonald from Southwest and Amy Gibson from Century, are here tonight to share the framework and the model that was put together through this work. JP?
Thank you, Dr. Massey, and thank you for board for having me tonight to talk about some of the work that's happening at both junior highs that Dr. Massey just outlined, and getting a chance to talk about some of the things that they had talked about over the summer, which I think is very exciting about the future for our new 7-8 building. And absolutely, all of this work came out of our strategic planning that took place with this past fall with a lot of community members and staff members from around our community. And I think it's very important that when we pull people in together to work on a strategic plan, that we follow through on that strategic plan. We should do what we say that we're going to do. And this work is directly related to that. And one of the things is this is about getting the transition right. Our community has blessed us with some terrific, generous resources to reimagine and redo school for Forest Lake kids. And we want to do that, and we want to do that well. And so in order to do that, we are pulling together, as you all know, all of our 7th and 8th graders across the district under one roof in a little over a year. And some of the ways that we could approach that would be to take a look at, as a Century staff, and look across town and welcome our 7th grade, our Southwest colleagues into our building and show them how we do things at Century. That would be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to sit down as a Century and Southwest group of teachers and make lists of the great things that we've done in the past and try to do about an equal number of great things, traditions, and processes from both staffs. That would be a second way. But I think both would fall short of doing what we need to do for Forest Lake students. To really think about not only what are the great things that are happening in our buildings already, but what are the great things that we can imagine that we haven't yet done? Things that maybe are happening in districts elsewhere in the state or in the country. And so I use this picture to kind of represent this. We want to make sure that we are reflecting upon and honoring our past, looking through that rearview mirror, but mostly we are looking forward into the future about where we want to go as a district. And so in order to do that, we pulled together a large group of people. Dr. Massey talked about 4-hour meetings, and you know something, the facilitator, that guy J.P. Jacobson, he filled every one of those meetings. As well as they spent time outside of those meetings reading and preparing for that discussion. And we knew that we were going to be bringing smart, talented, engaged people into a conversation around how we want to lay the foundation and framework for our new 7-8 building. And those people were going to come into that conversation with their own background and experiences and ideas and how we want to do school, which is important and relevant and important information. But we also wanted to make sure that people were thinking outside of what we've done as a district. And so we pulled them through a learning experience or a deep dive into the best things that can happen in a middle-level school going forward. And I'll share some of those resources that this group spent some time looking into. One of the things that we didn't do, though, we didn't write a mission statement for the middle school. And the reason for that is we have a mission statement. And here it is. We have a mission statement for our school district that outlines important, lofty expectations to ensure that each learner develops the skills and knowledge necessary to experience success and personal fulfillment in a global society. Our highly skilled staff partnering with our community, engaging students through creative, rigorous, relevant educational experiences in a culturally responsive, safe, and technology-laden world. That is a fantastic mission statement. We as a group operated underneath that mission statement. And what we did is we created a framework around how we're going to design this building. And we're going to share that framework with you in a minute, and Kim McDonald and Amy Gibson are going to do that for me because I think that they can speak to it better than I can. But in order to make sure that our work could be interpreted accurately, the intent of this committee, the work that they outline could be interpreted accurately by a number of committees that are going to come into play after this, we decided to create a shared definition of terms so that when they read through these powerful statements, the ones that we'll share with you in a moment, that people universally understood what they meant. In terms such as approachable, what does that mean? When we talk about college, career readiness, and life skills, what are those skills that we're talking about that not, even beyond content? Here are the skills that we want to and we are responsible for building in each of our kids that leave our system. We talked about diversity. What does that mean? Engagement. How is that maybe different than compliance? Innovation and equity. We had a lot of conversation around equity and how we can provide every student with what they need, not with what the other kid, their partner or their neighbor needs. Partnerships. We talked about personalized learning and what that looks like. How we can be responsive to people. Who are our stakeholders? The difference between being student-centered and teacher-focused. And we also define this term support. Support does not mean agreeing with you every time. Support maybe means building perspective. And so in a moment here, I'm gonna ask Kim McDonald to join me first, and she's gonna walk you through the document that I'm passing out to you right now. And you will see on this. You'll see on this framework, it starts with the shared definition of terms that I just shared with you. And then it goes into a series of boxes. And these boxes are linear in nature. We started by having conversations around our core values. What will our actions, words, and do and mean for our school? We use that to then begin to dream about, okay, now that we're going to be opening a new 7-8 building, what will that look like? What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to look, sound, and feel like as a building? With those dreams in place, we said, okay, here are our strategic outcomes. Here are the things that our building will do over the next several years as we build to a school that we want to be for Forest Lake kids. And with that in place, then what are some key required shifts? The way that school is done today, and this way that we just said that we will paint a picture for the future, what are some things that we need to change and how we do business? So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kim McDonald, and she's going to talk about our core values.
First of all, Thank you for having me here. It was quite an honor to be on this committee. We had great leadership from Dr. Massey to JP, to Jim, to Diane, so it's just kind of a pleasure to be here. And when I read these things, I think, what a great place to teach. You know, I've taught here for 27 years, and it's nice to kind of come back and you see it written up there of what a great place that our students, when you read this, who wouldn't want to be here, faculty, and the community, when they see those things, why won't they want to be here? So the core values we talked about, it's statements of belief that drive our words and actions. And again, Dr. Massey, JP, Jim, they did a great job of kind of taking all the things we had and put them, I believe, in 8 or 9 things up here. So I commend them on doing that, because there's a lot more than 8 or 9 when we started. So the first one, the social, emotional, intellectual, and physical development of all students drives every decision. Our school values diversity and meeting the needs of all students. Frequent, clear, and responsive communication is key to how we serve our community and staff. Positive, authentic, and supportive relationships serve as the foundation of our school community. Innovation and creativity allow us to test and improve ideas. The pursuit of excellence by all drives every action and decision. Our commitment to individual learning and growth is critical to our success. And the last one, strong partnerships and with families and the community add value to the educational experience for our students. So we felt if we could have those values in our school, again, who wouldn't want to come to our Forest Lake School, specifically the new 7-8 building? All right, I still have an overhead projector, so. Thank you. All right, the next one we went on to, environmental aspirations, or what will our building look, sound, and feel like when you enter? First one, our learning environment is a place where all ideas and identities are welcomed and supported. All spaces in the building will be easy to navigate, clean, safe, and visual inviting. Classrooms and common spaces will be places of conversation, debate, and engagement. Our classrooms are places where movement and various forms of interaction flourish. All staff members are visible, approachable, and use active supervision strategies. All stakeholders show respectful ownership of community spaces. People are treated as individuals with unique attributes, skills, and needs. Collaboration, innovation, and creativity are visible throughout the building. And finally, student and staff work is showcased throughout the building. Again, awesome place to work and to have kids or parents come in to do that.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to invite Amy Gibson up, and she's going to talk about the second two, or the last two components to our framework.
Unlike Kim, I am new to the district. I just completed my first year at Century as a 7th and 9th grade science teacher, so I have a bit of a different perspective than Kim. But what an exciting time to be joining the team here at Forest Lake. I think this is an incredible opportunity for us to really change the way we view how we educate the children in our communities. And how will we know that our new 7-8 building is on the right path? Well, we started talking about our strategic outcomes. What would happen? How would we know that we're getting to where we want to be? We will know that when we start seeing these things happening. We will ensure that all students meet grade level standards and/or a high level of personal academic growth. Our school will support the social, emotional, and physical development of all students. Foster school pride and enthusiasm for learning through a personalized learning experience. Engage and involve the community in the education of our students. Provide families with tools to support their students' educational journey. Practice both innovation and collaboration as a cohesive staff. Provide students with multiple positive personal connections with both staff and peers.
equip staff and students with the skills to support diversity and equity throughout the school, provide students and staff with the learning skills and resources necessary for success, focus on the development of college, career, and life skills in addition to course content, and prepare students to be active citizens. In order to get to this point, however, we do have to change the way we think and perceive how we deliver education. So we do recognize that this work is going to require some key shifts. So how will this future, this forward-looking future, be different from our current reality? Well, we need to change from students being passive listeners to being active participants in the classroom, from teacher-focused instruction to student-centered learning, from assessments used primarily to assign grades to frequent, authentic assessments used to drive instruction, from limited access to electives to a multitude of opportunities based on exploration and student interest, from staff being content experts first to a focus on meeting the holistic developmental needs of middle-level learners, from waiting for students to become leaders as they get older to developing leaders at all grade levels, from assuming students know what is expected to explicitly teaching, scaffolding, and modeling expectations, from equality in education, where every student gets the same, to equity in education, where every student gets what they need, from isolated teaching to collaboration, action research, innovation, and job-embedded staff development, from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, from confusing information systems to systems that are easy to understand and navigate, from an invitation for community involvement to strong, effective partnerships. And what we feel is important to point out in this list is that we are not trying to say that none of these things already exist. Several of these things are happening in small pockets here and there, but what we would like to see is to bring more of a systematic approach to bringing out the best things on this list so that we can apply that for all of our students in every classroom.
As you can see, these are powerful statements and really serve as a foundation for a type of school that any one of us would want to send our own sons or daughters or grandchildren or nieces or nephews to. And it's something that when we looked at what we wanted to be, we looked at it as if every one of those students were our kids going through the school. And so as we went through this process, here are some of the resources that we spent some time reviewing and thinking about. And again, teachers, some of them did this at their kitchen table, some out at the pool, by their house, wherever. They really did a lot of research and listening and thinking and reflecting before we got together to be able to develop the framework that we just shared with you. So what does this mean? This means at this point, with this work done, we can begin to do the nuts and bolts work that needs to happen, the detail level work around designing our school. And so we're in the process of this fall implementing a series of teams that are going to look at the things that we need to start looking at around advisory model, or how are we going to do conferences? What are our grading practices? How are we going to communicate with our community and parents? And again, now we have a framework so that not just the loudest person in those conversations, or perhaps the person who has the most eloquent argument, but instead we've got a framework to go back to that when we can't come to a consensus on what's the right path to go, we go back to what does our design framework say that we value and we're trying to attain. And that's the way that we intend to do this work. So here are some of the things that we have next steps going on. Obviously, we have yet to name the building, but we know that that's on the agenda as well to do earlier this year, and hopefully we can get that done. With that, that is the end of our presentation, but we'd love to answer any questions, and I'm going to ask Kim and Amy to stay up here because they are the experts. They're going to answer any questions that you might have about the process or the framework itself.
All right, do we have any questions?
I have one. This is so exciting, and thank you for the great work, everyone that was up there listed, and the great information. So this is so exciting, this foundation and this new framework. Are there plans, I'm sure there are, to share this with families, with parents? This is our shifts, these are our key shifts. this is how we intend to create this foundation.
You mind if I take that one?
Please.
Yeah. So for our first step after developing it was to share it with all of you to make sure that it resonated with the direction that the board would want to give us as we design the school. And as we get nodding heads from all of you, then yes, absolutely that we want to share that with now the rest of our colleagues. We would hope to do that during workshop week as well as to get this out to families, and not just families, perhaps community, to put this out there so people see, hey, where is our investment going? In not just bricks and mortar, but in terms of concepts and designs. And yes, that would be absolutely something that we'd want to do.
Well, I know it's something we want to do. What are your thoughts on how we would do that?
I think that we,
Open houses or
open houses,
email?
on our websites. I think we've got a number of communication tools, including Blackboard, that we can get that out. I think partnerships with our local newspapers, I think, is another way that we can do that. I think people would like to know about this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about too, that those core values, that you could laminate some posters at most schools, and after it's been introduced, you have those around the school, so it's a constant reminder not only to staff, but to students and families that these are the values of not only Southwest, but Century, and then the schools coming together.
I like that a lot. That's great.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's a little anxiety for the Southwest students making big changes and the staff and things like that. So I think getting this to them and getting them to the students. Are you going to do like any surveying for those once they merge? I mean, are you going to focus on trying to reach the students by surveying how they're feeling? I mean, how do you kind of make sure that they're feeling all these steps that you're showing us, great ideas, and just how do you watch that, and how do you analyze it? How are they doing?
So, Member Corcoran, are you talking about surveys before the merge or after?
Kind of after they're in, maybe a few months, and just kind of seeing how they're feeling and kind of seeing their progress as they merge together.
Yeah, there is elements of this document that talks about creating that safe space. Yeah, and I think that we would want to not only do what you just suggested, but I think that as the groups sit down and start to dig into this and how can we really enact the principles that are within this framework that was created, we might even want to do some of that surveying in advance of the transition. What are your worries and your concerns about going to another building? How can we get out in front of those things so that on day one, it feels like your school too? So I do think that we, both on the front end and certainly on the back end, as you suggested, is pulling information, perception information out of our kids and figuring out how we can use that. Absolutely.
That there is intention to get information and ideas from the students as well. So that idea of checking in how they're feeling after the transition, we're already been talking about starting out this year, this fall. So it isn't just wait and see how you're feeling afterwards, but let's do this together and really shift the focus from you and I to we. And that's what we've done in this meeting. We've spent a lot of time, Southwest and Century, together over this past year, doing staff development, talking together, working together. So we're already on this progress of building this new school together. And I think that will also carry over in the conversations we have as staff members with our students, that it is becoming a process of learning.
Great. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I really appreciate, all the work you're putting into this to make it a smooth transition. I think our 7-8 students are lucky to have the people that are excited and really energized and understand how important those grades are for a kid's development and how they, it's just such a critical point in their life. And so I appreciate you guys taking it so seriously and doing everything in your power to make it work out great. So appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank you for all your time.
All right, positive happenings. Jill, you want to start?
Yes. Kind of slim. It's been a busy summer, but I did go to the Youth Service Bureau taste event with Gail. We had a great time, and I ended up winning a $50 Aqua gift card. And that's all I got.
I got nothing. I was gone most of the month.
Well, and I did go to a couple of fundraisers, but mostly I've been driving around watching the construction and just amazed at what the community has done for us, and so thankful to them for their vote. And along with what they're saying about how people would love to be a part of this district, I think we're going to just see that mushroom, that people are going to see we're now not only have great students and staff, but we have great facilities to match. So that's been real positive for me.
Same boat for me, not a whole lot. On the Tefla front, we're gearing up for our big growing Tefla at Waldock Farms coming up in September. And as the co-treasurer, I've also been working with our accounting firm to kind of close out our books for last year and get the budget ready for next year. So been working on some Tefla stuff recently.
Great.
Yes, that is a positive happening. See you guys, we just got that mailing, so that was nice. I did go to the taste with Jill. I won nothing. 0, but she had to text me the next day. Guess what? I won a $50. So we had a great time, but I had a lot of fun chatting with Matt Howard about how much they love their new space. I have not yet been in there, so I want to get in there and check it out, but they sound like they're really happy there. The other thing I wanted to mention that's a positive happening is the Stomp Out Suicide. It's coming up. It's the 6th annual. I do it every year, limping along or walking or running, whatever I do. But the Haynes family has transferred it over. This is the first year that Canvas Health will be running it. So if anybody's interested, it's on the 19th and still at Goodview Park. And that's it.
Thank you.
Mine was the tours. I'm not sure if we've talked about that since our last meeting. I get confused when our last meeting was, but I didn't go to part of it, but I did attend the Forest Lake Elementary tour, and it was amazing, all the work that's been done, and just to see the hallway all dug, big hole down the hallway. It was like, that's where my kids all went. I don't have carpet in there anymore, the new bathrooms. I mean, I said it's a lot harder to fix an old school than to build a new. And these guys said, oh yeah, because there's so many things they have to fix and that pop up that that they didn't anticipate. So they did a great job, and it's just exciting to see all the new things. And I know Karen went on the tours too and saw the transportation building.
It's amazing.
It's great. It's exciting times. Yeah, that's
Right.
it for me. Yep.
Thank you. And I think for my part, this is small, but it points something out, is that when I came to this meeting tonight, I walked over a new slab of concrete. I've been on this board over 13 years, and I've been walking over a cracked piece of concrete and cracked in a couple of different directions. And so it's just very exciting to me that, a little thing like that we got a decent piece of concrete outside this building, just like we're seeing all around the district. To me, that represents just a really great positive change, and I hope people understand that when they pass that bond, it's got so many quality of life improvements. That's one of them, but there's 100,000 around this district that are happening, and it's just a good feeling to me. So that's my positive act. So reports, 916, Member Tyson.
Yes, 916 met last night. They had, after following the board meeting, they had a tour of Pink Hollow, the new education center in Lake Elmo. And if you remember, 5 years ago, their vision was to open one kind of for the Northern Metro, which was Carner Blue Education Center. And then that other end would be Lake Elmo, Pink Hollow, and then Cora is opening up, and that's more Columbia, Little Canada. But anyway, they met and kind of did their routine things. We went over superintendent's evaluation and approved Superintendent Hayes' new contract. We went over the membership options, which basically for 27-18 are unchanged from the past. Enrollment in all the level 4 programs, as I've said before, continues to be closed to non-members. They also approved the organizational chart, and there were a few changes there, but not many, and recognized retirements, and that was about it. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Equity Alliance, Member Moorhead.
Mine will be very short because we have not met in this last month, but we are meeting third Wednesday of this month, so we'll have more to report. They just keep moving on, trying to find more members and more staff development opportunities, more equity, so we'll have more report next month.
All right. And City of Forest Lake, I don't have anything to report. Member Moorhead, do you have anything to?
Seems like there's a lot going on. It's a lot of growth, which is good for the city and the school district. And Sam is here tonight. I don't know if he has anything that he'd like to bring up that's been going on.
We're just beginning our workshops now for budgeting and that sort of thing. The latest thing that's happened that didn't necessarily agree on was they're actually doing a study now with the police, and it's going to take place over the next 2 or 3 months. In a way, it's a good thing. They're going to be vindicated, I'll tell you that. And other than that, it's just been normal business as far as paying the bills and that kind of thing. But we are starting the budgeting process, which will take place now through December, so for next year.
And Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't you looking for people's ideas on the comprehensive plan too?
Yes.
Is it the 10-year plan?
It's supposed to go up to 2040.
Right, so if anyone has any ideas on what they'd like to see in Forest Lake,
There's a website, you can, there's
I did that.
what is it, what do you want to call it?
survey.
Or survey, let's
Yep.
put it that way. And so, yeah, please participate. I'm not on that board, but there's a lot of good people that are on that. So, hopefully on by this winter.
The
All right,
growth,
thank you.
the growth, I think, is what's most exciting in both businesses and residential. And certainly that brings in hopefully students, and I think the Y has had a very big impact on that. So we're just grateful for the movement forward.
And then I just wanted to add one thing quickly. The roundabout down on the end by Leela, going to the Y. It's going to be nice to have that that path all corrected.
New to me.
Yeah. Lots of construction going on out there.
All right, I have to travel that direction.
All right, thank you. Reshaping Opportunities for Success 2015, 2020. Director Martini.
Good evening, everyone. This is really exciting. I do have to apologize for the lighting conditions because today it was a little dark. Our first slide is always a recognition of those who are really hard at work on this process. The engineers, architects, the construction managers, Mike and Steve from Springstead, and I really have to thank you. I've got the easy task. I get to show you pictures. I attend some of these meetings, but these are some of the pictures that we have taken. This is the parking lot that is not complete, that will probably finish near the end of August. We're focusing all of our asphalt work onto the schools before the district office, so it'll be muddy here for a while. But as we turn our attention to the north, this is the high school student lot that's been expanded and paved along the left-hand side. And we will have pavement before school starts in that northern part, very close to the building. Keep your eye on the pine trees that are off to the right, because the view of those trees out this classroom on the second floor is spectacular. Now the lighting, again, I have to
Think of the
apologize for that, but what a great view. So back to the area that we like to focus on when we go to the voters again, probably looking towards improvements on that track and LED lighting potential, et cetera, for our competition athletic field. And looking off in the distance in the center of the picture, Century. Here, the ball fields, we were thrown a little bit of a curve recently. We didn't know the city was involved in a moratorium on their wells. So they are studying for a 9-month period their wellhead protection plan. So we're going to need to do a workaround for this fall planting here at the Century Ball Fields.
Explain that, I don't understand.
We're not able to punch our well in until the city decides how we're going to handle wells. So we just learned that earlier this week. And in the front of Century, we'll have asphalt all the way off to the right and left, but the footings for the new classroom addition, you see in the cement area there. And so what's outlined for footings will end up looking like this. I think the lighting is really good. Forest Lake Elementary, finishing touches on the secured front entrance and the working hard, as you were mentioning, Dr. Corcoran, on the inside. The floors are solid. They're actually tiling in some places, and we've got rooms complete. Columbus Elementary, I do believe I was derelict earlier in the summer, because when I drive around and there's a crane, I stop. And I take a look, and so these are the air units coming off of Columbus Elementary. I didn't get to show you those in June. And these are air units sliding into the facility, which is pretty exciting because they're much easier to maintain. It won't be on the rooftop subject to the weather conditions, and so that's really pretty neat. Lino Lakes, as you're aware, a two-phase project, and we will have that center area just off to the left, the center area of the parking lot, demolished so we can still have some construction laydown area as work continues throughout the fall, and yet do our busing and parking operation. This is another look from a little more angle towards the south. This is looking directly north where the courtyard is gone, and the office trailer is in the far right hand side behind the gymnasium in the back. So you can't see it, but there's a drive on the right side where that Viking electric truck is, and then the offices are just back in that area. What's going to be happening in the upcoming future? An addition of almost 170,000 square feet. So we will be talking with folks from Ellers and Associates. They employ Greg Crow. Greg Crow used to be a legislative analyst and working at the Capitol. As you folks know, we've been trying very hard to get into the alternative facilities and really employ Greg's talents. He's already had some conversations with Tom Melcher indicating that it's very likely we're going to end up qualifying for
yay.
facilities. Now, every space that we touch, such as Columbus and that, is no longer old because it's new. So we may have some issues with age of facilities, but we certainly will qualify for square footage. Coming up summer of 2018 and 2019, you're completely aware of this, but every time we post this presentation, we like to have the added information up there just in case folks are. So when was Linwood going to be completed? I want to share something new. I get a report every month from our investment advisors, PMA Securities, and you're going to see two slides for each of the bond issues. Remember, our $143 million were split into two different issues. So the first issue that closed in May of 2016 yielded almost $76 million to go into the construction fund. And their current estimates are that we'll earn over the life of these investments through 2019 a little over $800,000, and we've expended $44 million at this point in time. The next chart is actually a bar chart, which will show you how that spending compared to what our original cash flows were. And so we're actually going to be earning a lot more than what they thought initially. Their initial interest projections were a little over $500,000. But now yield curves have changed and all sorts of things have been modified, and we have not been spending this as quickly as originally anticipated. We just got revised cash flows from ICS. We're expecting revised cash flows from Krause-Anderson, so that we'll have graphs that line up a little better for the rest of the project. But the good news is that we're $300,000 more of interest income than we expected when we put that money in the bank roughly a year ago. The next series of slides are identical in scope, but the content is related to the December 15th Series 2016B. We dumped $67 million into the portfolio at this point, and oddly enough, that reduced dollar amount is still going to yield about the same interest income. So over $1.7 million in interest income. Now, if we had the same interest yield for the revenue that we did for bond expense, which is a little under 3%, we're talking about $5 or $6 million. So we won't be subject to arbitrage. That's probably bad news. We won't have to give money back to the U.S. Treasury. But it is a lot more interest income than we planned on, so that's great. Here is the chart that details how expenses and actual compare with the projected expenditures. And so they plan on holding these investments for a much longer period of time and not spending them out during this current winter. So with that, any questions or comments? And again, I want to thank you. I've got the easy job showing you pictures.
Questions?
That interest, is that money that we can do something with, or is that money that just saves the taxpayer?
So that is money dedicated to projects that have increased in scope and we do have.
Okay, so when we still say under budget and on time, that will help us maintain that.
Absolutely.
And I have one more question. In the beginning, over the 6 gymnasiums, was there a second floor? And
At
did we
one point, there was consideration during design. I remember when Dr. Mattson shared with you that we were going to eliminate the upper walking track area. It just didn't make sense from a cost-benefit ratio. We still have a walking track.
Right,
But that
and the
upper area-
wide as too. The question came up because another school district, and I don't remember which one it was, has that, and how the parents really appreciated that opportunity to be up above and watch. And I said, that would be
That's
something,
Butt Lakes.
and that's something Forest Lake would look at as a real want, not a need. And so again, I was very happy that, it sounded beautiful, but it made me feel good to think, no, if that was something that we couldn't justify in the spending, that we just don't have it.
Sure. No, I know
We do the
Butt Lakes,
needs.
the superintendent Lindholm was new to the district there, thought a good source of revenue would be to charge walkers.
Oh, my.
Yes.
I'll walk outside. I'll walk to the Dairy Queen.
So Larry, I just had a question, if you could clarify. You said we don't have to pay any taxes.
So if we exceed interest earnings and we're not spending down our bond within a 3-year time frame or an 18-month time frame, if you earn in excess of what your bonding costs, you must revert those dollars to the U.S. Treasury. And that's because they don't want us to be in the business of selling bonds to make money.
Right, okay. Makes
We're not in
sense.
that position.
No, that's good. But like you said, it's great that we have that.
Right.
If something runs over in cost, then we can use those.
And we've actually identified
Extra.
aspects of our project to be funded by that interest income.
That's wonderful. That's great,
It's
Nancy.
easy to do, yeah.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thanks,
thank
Larry.
you.
Thanks, Larry.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Massey.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to report 5 weeks into my position, I'm quickly getting accustomed to the work. It's truly a tremendous honor to serve this great district as superintendent and to work closely with each of you in leading the district forward. We have a tremendous staff throughout the district who work tirelessly every day to provide the best experience and education for our students. A special recognition to Dr. Mattson, my predecessor, who I'm sure is enjoying every moment of her well-deserved retirement. She created lasting momentum for our district from which we all benefit. Thank you for the trust you have placed in me, and I look forward to partnering with the educators throughout the district to provide a first-class education for our students and for the community. A special thank you also to Connie Ramberg, who has been an enormous help in my transition. I would like to take this moment to recognize one of our gifted educators who passed away on July 20th. Dawn Soltis, who was hired in 2012, worked as a special education teacher at the high school. Dawn was a gifted educator with a special talent for connecting with students, pushing them through her direct and compassionate style to succeed. This past year, Dawn's dog, as you see in the picture, was introduced to our students and served as a therapy dog to so many of our students, and perhaps staff too, I should say. Dawn's warm smile and comforting disposition will be deeply missed, and our condolences go to her and her family and friends. A memorial service for Dawn will be held at Robert's Funeral Home this Saturday at 2 p.m. with the visitation starting at noon. We're fast approaching the start of the school year with the first day of class starting on August 21st, which is 2 weeks ahead of where we typically start. Our adjusted school calendar will provide an additional 2 weeks for construction next summer. Needless to say, the short summer has put a great strain on the construction crews working at Columbus, Forest Lake Elementary, Lionel Lakes, Century Junior High, the high school, and the transportation building. As we have heard from Director Martini, the crews will be working right up to the start of the school year and beyond, making sure that our schools are ready for students. I would like to acknowledge our construction management crews from Kraus Anderson and ICS and their contractors for their skillful work and their very long days. A special thank you to Mike Kopitz, who is running throughout the district supervising the work. Mike has been a true asset to these projects from day one. Director Martini has provided exceptional vision and oversight throughout the project, and he deserves a great deal of credit for the magnitude of the work and for keeping the projects within our budget parameters. I would also like to recognize the principals and the staff and teachers who are affected by construction in their buildings. The staff have put in countless hours preparing for the construction and for the return of students to their classrooms and their schools. Their work and commitments to this effort is greatly appreciated. Teachers return to work on August 14th. The week will start off with an all-teacher assembly in the auditorium with a keynote address from National Motivational Speaker Mark Scherenbrock, and I would like to thank our Ranger Up corporate sponsors and partners for funding this event. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any items we'd like pulled from the consent agenda?
Move approval of 7.1 to 7.5.
Second?
All right, do we have any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, change is approved. All right, I'd like to call up Jason Miller, our new junior high assistant principal. Would you like to introduce him, Steve?
Absolutely. What I'd actually like to do is turn the mic back over to J.P. Jacobson and the many folks that were interviewed for this position. A very talented pool that Jason beat out, and the large staff that participated in that process as well. JP?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we needed to do this summer was to fill out the administrative team at Southwest, and I spent many hours scanning through applications to find some really good candidates, and we ended up interviewing 18 people, all of which were high-quality candidates, and I think that is a tribute to our district, that we attract good people, as well as we had fantastic internal candidates as well that vied for this position. And through that process that involved 3 different interviews, we selected Jason Miller. And Jason's going to come up and talk to you in a second, but I'm going to try to steal all of his lines first. Jason taught at Moorhead, and then in Colorado. He's got experiences working in Minnetonka, Mounds View, and Becker. He comes to us as both experience as a science teacher, a peer coach, a dean, and an assistant principal, and he really impressed the community, the committees, that not only is he articulate and well-versed in instructional best practice, but most importantly, what teachers in the committee said over and over again is he's in it for kids. He's in it to do great things for kids, and that's exactly the sort of person that we want to hire for our district. And so I think we hired a fantastic person, and I'm excited to work alongside him at Southwest, and I'm going to welcome him and allow him to say a few words.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Massey and members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be here. I'll try to make my remarks short and brief, but I'm just very excited for the opportunity. As you saw when JP presented with our staff, just the wonderful changes in the work that has already been put into place in the work that we're going to be working on for this next year. It's just an exciting time, and it's an exciting time for the community and for staff and for the kids. I can't wait to get going. I can't wait to get started, and so I'm just really looking forward to the next step of supporting students and teachers and the wonderful work that's already occurring. I was lucky enough to be able to join the committee that was doing the 7-8 modeling on their last session, and just walked away so impressed by the passion that everyone has towards the work that we're doing for our students and for our community, and can't wait to be a part of it and hopefully make some positive impacts and strides for our students and our families as well.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, agenda item 8, donations. Member Odegaard?
Yes. Start out with a conference meeting space from Ziegler Cat in Columbus to district administrators valued at $800, $2,869.96 from the Forest Lake Softball Booster Club to the high school softball team for payment of an assistant coach, $5,000 from the Spring Lake Park Lions Club to ISD 831 to contribute to negative school lunch balances, prevention materials from the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation through funding from the Fred C. and Catherine B. Anderson Foundation to Forest Lake area schools in support of prevention work in the district valued at $3,000, $50 from B. Zaruba in Chisago City to Forest Lake area schools to purchase school supplies for back-to-school event on August 9th, $300 from First Resource Bank in Lino to Forest Lake area schools for the same event, the back-to-school event on August 9th, and $500 from the Forest Lake Lions Club to Forest Lake area schools family support to purchase school supplies. And with that, I move approval of accepting all of those donations.
All right, second.
Second?
Any discussion?
You know, just one, that Spring Lake Park Lions Club, I was really amazed by that.
Yes.
And I didn't
We had a
know,
district.
we must have maybe a community member that's involved with that, or what, how that came to be. Do we ever get any
I
information?
am not familiar with the origin of that
Yeah.
gift. Very generous,
Well, we certainly want to thank Spring Lake Park for helping us.
certainly.
And I'd also like to kind of mention that there's a booster club in there that helped hire an assistant coach, and I think that happens a lot.
It does.
Where that money, which is kind of hard earned, goes into the direct, instruction and guidance to the kids through these assistant coaches. It's really nice, and I just want to kind of bring that up and say how much I appreciate it, or as a board, we appreciate that.
How many times we look at this list and we
Yeah.
go,
See
wow,
that.
what will we do without these folks? Because they really do help.
All right, so any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, donations accepted. All right, old business. 9.1, discussion of community survey and related levy bond discussion. Before we begin, I just kind of want to lay out how, I talked to some people earlier, but how I think this is maybe can play out is that with 9.1, we're going to hear from Morris Leatherman. They're going to talk to us about our survey results, and then I think what we'll do is we'll have a discussion about those survey results, and then I'll try to answer a couple of questions with the board, which is, if we have a levy, what are those levy numbers going to be? If we want a bond, what those bond numbers are going to be, and then finally, what the duration of our levy is going to be, right? And we can mix those around or whatever, but I think we'll have a discussion, and we'll kind of figure out where we're starting to fall with those numbers, and if we're seeing a consensus, and get a feel for whether we're prepared to move tonight, which I would like to do. I think a lot of us would, so that the levy and bond groups can get moving on that, and we can move forward, or not. And then on 9.2, that if we feel like we're kind of coming to consensus, and we feel like there's a path moving forward, then I talked to Jeff, and we have a resolution that we can hand out as we move along, that it just has some numbers in here for right now, but if we feel like we're coming to consensus, then we'll use those numbers, and then Jeff or somebody else can move this resolution forward, and then we can do discussion on and a vote on whether we want to move forward. Does that seem reasonable with everyone?
Sounds
Perfect.
good.
All right.
Welcome.
Morris Leatherman, welcome.
Interesting part.
Well, let me say first, it's a real pleasure to be here with you tonight to talk about the survey we undertook on behalf of the school district. The presentation is going to include some of the questions that were common to both the July 2015 residential survey, taken prior to your bond referendum, and the current one, also taken in July. Let me begin first by talking about the methodology for a moment. We spoke with 500 randomly selected households across the Forest Lake Area School District. The telephone interviews were conducted between July 10th and July 20th. The average interview time was 24 minutes. 10 people, though, actually talked to us for over 90 minutes.
Wow.
Most wanted to talk to us about police services in the city of Forest Lake. So I had some time to get them back focused onto the school district. The sample is projectable to the universe of all adult residents within plus or minus 4.5% in 95 out of 100 cases. The non-response rate of 3%, and we've always had very, very low non-response rates in talking to residents of this district. Keep in mind that 3% compares to the industry average of 25%.
Really good. Wow.
Let's begin first by talking about some general perceptions of the school district. We asked people what they liked most about the school district. And that question was asked as an open-ended question. That is, we did not provide forced responses or any choices, and it was asked early enough in the survey where we weren't prejudging them into certain avenues by talking about the quality of education, talking about teachers, that kind of thing. Now, as you can see, we have both the 2015 results in the blue bars and the 2017 results in the red. The number one in both years was good teachers. 22% 2 years ago, 16% now. And that is not a statistically significant variation in terms of comparing the two surveys. If we take a look, number two was good academics. This time at 14%, last time at 13%. And then finally, excellent academics also came in at 14%. It was 11% last time. So in general then, what we have is a pattern in which teachers rank first in terms of the things people like most, and the second are the academic programs. Let's consolidate both good academics and excellent academics. And then we can also talk about the number three categories, which are a variety of programs and the broad curriculum. That was the 1, 2, 3 we also saw 2 years ago. Now, in addition, there has been an increase in sports, moving from 3% to 7%, and that's certainly something to take notice of. And like the other is the nothings. That is the folks that told us there is nothing they like about a school district. The 9% is relatively low. And in fact, we always find roughly about 10% in any school district, regardless of where we're surveying across Minnesota, with that bunch of, we call them friendly critics. That's the euphemism I'm using anyway. Now, if we're going to ask people what they like most about the district, the next thing we should ask them is, what do you think is the most serious issue currently facing the district? And on this, the number one this time, coming in at 16%, and again, this is not a statistically significant change from last time, is poor past spending. That's always been an issue. As you can see, last time it was 11%. The second one is lack of funding. Coming in at 13%, this time a drop from 17%. And the third, high taxes at 12%. The high taxes response, though, is about half of what we're finding in a lot of the other districts across the metropolitan area. I should indicate to you at this point we were working with 15 districts that were headed into referendums this fall across the metropolitan area and greater Minnesota. We unfortunately, and I'll talk more about this in a minute, because of the climate that we're facing this year, have had to advise 2 districts to not go for a referendum at all, that they need more time to make a persuasive case. Now, there is one change in that chart, which I will apologize for. The nothing. It says 9% this year. It's actually 13%. The nothing are the folks that are your boosters. They are with you through thick and through thin. They're the ones that, when we asked what's the most serious issue facing the district, basically told us, how dare you ask us a question like that? There's absolutely nothing wrong with this district. And those folks track right through the survey. We can see them giving high evaluations right across the board and being very, very acceptant of policies or directions that the district wants to go in. That's separate then from the folks that said they were unsure. These folks, when we probed a little bit further with them, said, I'm sure there's something out there, but I really can't think of it at this time. So the nothings, though, at 13%, that's running about twice as high as the norm across the greater metropolitan area. And again, those are your core supporters.
Mr. Morris, what was the, if you could back up just 1 minute.
Sure.
Scattered.
Oh, the scattered, those are issues that came in at less than 1%.
Oh, okay.
So 4 or 5 people indicated they didn't like potholes in the parking lot was one. And again, that was one of our 90-minute folks that basically told us about almost wrecking a tire in one of the potholes. They also, the kinds of things that generally come in on that tend to be fairly idiosyncratic. Perhaps a flyer that they didn't like. There were 3 people who reported that. And what we do on that is we can't really give them a category if they're 1%. It's too small.
Okay.
So we classify them under.
I didn't know if they meant that the district was too scattered,
Yeah, that's what I
too much around. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll use more clarifying.
Please.
Miscellaneous.
What about the quality of public schools in the district? Well, in 2015, 85%, very high rating, indicated either excellent or good, the positive ratings, while 12% reported a more negative rating, only fair or poor. This time, very, very little change again, 83% positive and 14% negative. Where this puts the district in terms of the rest of the greater metropolitan area is within the top quartile of school districts. So the top 25%, well above the norm in terms of, well above the average in terms of the excellent and good ratings, and certainly in terms of excellent ratings, ranking right up there with many of what we call the Gold Coast districts. So like an Orono, like a Medina, like a Minnetonka. Again, the 30% is very impressive as an excellent rating. What about financial management? And here this has not been as big an issue as we found in other areas across the metropolitan area. In 2015, 57% rated the district positively in terms of its financial management, while 36% rated it negatively. That stayed pretty much the same at 53% positive and 38% negative. We actually have, among the districts we've worked with over the past year, about 7 that residents indicated what we call an upside down rating, with far more people indicating negative evaluations of financial management than positive ones. What's the average on this across the metropolitan area? Well, currently we're at about 45% in terms of excellent and good ratings, and about 35 to 40% in terms of only fair and poor ratings.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is that 8% unsure, is that typical? I mean, it's interesting to me that people have, so many people have an opinion about the financial numbers in a school.
The 8% unsure, uncertainty on this one has been falling over the past decade, with more and more people tuning in, and certainly if there's been what we call an unfortunate incident with respect to finances, more people, that uncertainty will go down to about 2%.
Yeah.
But by and large, in terms of the rest of the metro area, the greater metro area, that 8% is in line with what we're finding right across the board. Most people will be fairly forgiving and in fact very complimentary if district finances seem to be appearing to be stable over the long run. The things that tend to really change things is a shock to the system.
Yep. Thank you.
We then ask people to think about their local property taxes, the total, and ask them how it compared to neighboring areas, neighboring communities. And what we found this time was that 55% indicated they thought they were on the high side. That's an increase from 52%, again statistically insignificant, but thought the same way 2 years ago. Average stayed about the same as well, as you can see, 43% 2 years ago to 41% currently. Somewhat low and very low now has disappeared, but they were never all that large, nor have we ever found them to be that large anywhere in the greater metropolitan area. And uncertainty tends to be very, very low in this district in comparison with other districts. We then asked a second question. Now let's focus on school property taxes. And what we found here, you can see the uncertainty is a little bit higher, with some people just not being able to pull out what the school component is of their property taxes. But as you can see this time, we've got 45% who indicate it's on the high side, and that is a statistically significant increase from 2 years ago when it was 36%. But we also have to keep in mind that this is standard for most districts that have had a successful bond referendum or operating levy referendum. So that's now built into the system a bit. But as you can see, the about average is still roughly 50%. It changed from 52 to 48. If we had to characterize the tax climate here, we would call it borderline hostile, but very, very borderline hostile. If we take a look, just for some comparisons you might be interested in, if we go out into western Hennepin County suburbs, for example, it's not unusual to find the very high and somewhat high up at 70%. If we take a look at other parts of Washington County, among our clients there, we actually have highs in the 60s. So consequently, to have a benign climate, and we define that very, very strictly as being one in which the about average is at least 50%, if not closer to 55%, and the high side is down around 40%. You're not that far away, and that's why we call you borderline. It still indicates, though, that you're going to, in any kind of a referendum coming up, establish clearly in people's minds that there is a need. Now, let's start talking first about the bond referendum. We asked people, and we came at this from a number of different ways. We first asked about tax increases for specific bond components. And there were 5 that we presented to people. So, retrofitting current school buildings. And I've shortened this a bit from the survey question itself. 2/3, 66% said they would support a property tax increase, 31% would oppose it. Now, in terms of marginal comments, though, when we talk about retrofitting current school buildings, we need to broaden that, because we ask this in terms of such as natural sunlight. Natural sunlight doesn't feel to a lot of people as being a retrofit. That's nice to have, but it's something that by and large people said, no, I wouldn't vote for the referendum if it's just for natural sunlight. So as a result then, when we're talking retrofitting, we need to talk about exactly what's involved in the retrofitting. Upgrading music spaces, very, very nice, 60% in favor of a tax increase for that purpose. Upgrading the existing auditorium, 57% indicated they would support a tax increase. And keep in mind that we're looking at generally about 20% differences between the support level and the opposition level. Now we come to athletics, and athletic facilities are always more challenging. Improving the outdoor practice fields, you had 55% in favor. That's unusual. Generally, that is around 45 to even 40% in favor, with 42% opposed, and upgrading the current stadium, 54% to 42%. Again, unusually high in comparison to what we find in other school districts. But what this is telling us is that there is no stop sign on any of these. That is, they're getting majority support on each and every item. But we still aren't talking about costs yet. What we're trying to find here is there's something that would cause people to vote against an entire bond referendum because you included that component as part of the package. And there isn't anything that would stop people from voting for it. Now, how did people feel about the overall improvements package after we went through those components? What we found was that 65% indicated they thought it was a good idea, and 25% indicated they thought that it was a bad idea. Again, very, very solid. If we take a look at those that felt strongly, more intense about it, you actually have more people in the 19% indicating affirmative intensity versus 13% indicating negative intensity. So by and large, when looking at that package, people are saying it's a reasonable balance of things. Now, we did test one price point. $18 million. Is that a fair price for the kinds of things that we're talking about? And what we found is that we had a bare majority of 50% saying yes to 40% saying no. What that indicates to us is that while you do have a bare majority in favor, as that price is lowered, as you bring the cost down, we would definitely expect to see the number of yeses saying yes, that's a very, very fair price. So as a result, the 18 million may be pushing things too far. Well, how do people feel about a tax increase for bonding? And this is our let's make a deal question. I don't know if any of you remember 2 years ago. But we started at a random point, and then people can tell us yes or no, and we go higher or lower depending on what they say. We call it The Price is Right because in that old TV show it was always higher, higher, lower, lower. And as a result, we actually do have people who move 3 or 4 slots in terms of the various options we give them. Now, as you can see right off the bat, 36% indicated that they would be unwilling to pay anything for the building bond. However, if we take a look at everybody, taking out those folks that are unsure, because we did test them, and those are not folks that are basically Minnesota nice and don't want to tell a stranger, an interviewer, that they won't support a tax increase, we have a median increase of about $4 a month. Now, this is unattached to any kind of financial analysis of the various components. This is what people say, well, if you were going to go for a bonding bill, what I'd expect to see is probably a $4 a month increase, or roughly $50 a year increase in order to pay for the construction. But again, this is what we call a blank question in terms of we aren't providing actual specifics. We aren't providing the kinds of things that would be disseminated by the district in terms of bond referendum information. But nevertheless, it is very good that we have less than 40% in that nothing category. We are beginning to see more and more greater hostility with respect to tax increases this year, right across the board, right throughout Minnesota, in fact, in terms of our testing. And the 36% indicating nothing, while we would have loved to have seen that at 25% or 30%, nevertheless, we would call that a manageable amount of opposition. And again, we haven't tied this directly to the components that you're talking about in terms of that package. Now, let's approach the question of an operating levy carefully. We tested 2 different points. One was on a $1,000 per pupil unit operating levy referendum, revoke and replace, with the 1,000 BPU addition. When we provided people with the price point, that is the tax costs, in addition to what the funds would be used for, what we found was that 35% would support, while 60% would oppose. To quote an old movie title, that may be a bridge too far. Most people, in particular, looking at strong opposition being almost 1/3 of the residents and strong support being only 9%, that indicates a very, very tough slog to get that through at the 1,000 level. Now, we also tested a second price point, and that was a $500 per pupil unit operating levy. And what we found there was that 48% would support, while 49% would oppose. 3% were uncertain. But if we take a look at strong support and strong opposition, you can also see a back down in terms of 10% on the strong opposition and a 7% increase in the strong support. That one appears to be eminently acceptable with a very, very good communications effort and grassroots effort like you had 2 years ago. We then, and this is something new that we've been trying, we helped Minnetonka pass one of these 2 years ago. They went for a 3-step operating levy vote. The first step was that we tested for this district was at the $500 per pupil unit amount. On year 3, we would then increase that to $750, or an additional $250 per pupil unit. And then finally, in year 5, it would increase to the full $1,000. Now, as you can see, 44% indicated support, while 53% indicated opposition. And strong support and strong opposition, we again have an unfavorable ratio. What is driving this, as we began to look between the 3 options and how people tended to be casting their support for opposition, is the $1,000 per pupil unit is just very, very bothersome to people. And even putting that off 5 years from now doesn't appear to be enough time. So, let's talk about arguments in favor and opposed. And there are a lot of arguments in favor that people really resonated to. Now let me explain this chart to you. We asked people, or we read a list of statements about the operating levy. And we then said, okay, on the basis of that statement, would you be much more likely to support the operating levy? Would you be somewhat more likely to do so, or does it make no difference to you at all? Now, these folks could be supporters, opponents, or undecided. So we're looking at the entire audience of the 500 randomly selected individuals we spoke with. So some resonated a little bit stronger than others. And in fact, if we want to take this down a step further and look at likely voters, we actually have several that seem to not do as well among the general population that people really do respond to. So what kinds of things tend to resonate with potential voters? Well, one is that the operating levy would provide for long-term financial stability. 25% indicated that yes, that would make them much more likely to support. Second, it would reduce the impact of low state funding. And again, 25% indicated they would be much more likely to support. Offsetting the impact of federal budget cuts at 26% also indicated at least a quarter that are more likely to support. And then finally, one in which hasn't run as well in some districts, but has run about as well in other districts, is that open enrollment in charters are providing competition, and the additional funding will allow the Forest Lake area public schools to stay competitive. And that came in at 24%. The argument, though, which seems to only impact 17% at the bottom, is the teacher shortage. That there's a current teacher shortage and additional funds are needed to retain and attract high-quality teachers. Now, we saw earlier that teachers do play a key role in terms of the things that people like about the school district. When we looked at that in more detail, it actually does change more folks out of opposition and indecision into support. That is, by talking about the impact on keeping high-quality teachers, you're making a very, very strong argument in favor of an operating levy. Now, how do we put this all together? Well, one of the things that we've developed, and this has occurred since we saw you last, is we actually, on the basis now of having worked with done 400 surveys, 4 referenda over the past 5 years, we actually are able to derive a probability of success. And we took a look at the 3 points that were mentioned, the 500, the 750, and the 1,000. And what we found on the basis of turnout, who's turning out and who could potentially be turned out, the strength of support, the strength of opposition, and a number of other factors in terms of our let's make a deal question, those kinds of things. What we have is that the $500 per pupil level, you have a 55%, we would project a 55% probability of passage. At the 750 level, it's still very high at 48%. But what that indicates, the 48%, we would of course like to see that stay above 50, but nevertheless, with an aggressive communications effort and the same kind of grassroots efforts that you've had in the past, that also is doable. And the $1,000 per pupil unit, again, 38% probability, and we found that once the probability goes below 40%, very, very few are able to actually put that across the finish line. So what we would recommend to you on the basis of that is somewhere between 500 and 750. In fact, perhaps closer to 750, if not directly on the 750 per pupil unit figure. Now, we asked a summary question in terms of, suppose the election were today. What would you do? Now, keep in mind that when this was asked, we were looking at an $18 million bond referendum, and people also were aware of the fact that the operating levy could be $1,000 per pupil unit. As a result, 43% told us they would support both. Going to the polls, they would be in favor of both. 7% said I would support the bond, but I would not support the operating levy. 5% told us they would support the operating levy, but they would not vote for the bond, and 38% indicated they would oppose both. Now, again, keep in mind that we were looking at high figures at this point in the survey. The 43% support both is a little bit low. It provides discomfort, at least from our point of view. We like to see that at least 46, 47, 48, if not up at 50. The opposition to both at 38% is also a little bit higher than we would like to see. But if we combine those figures for a moment, what that suggests is that the bond referendum, if the election took place at the time that we were surveying the public, it would pass 50% to 43%. And the operating levy, a little bit closer, 48% to 45%. So as a result, that still is iffy. But again, we looked at the probabilities. You have that in front of you in terms of what might be the ideal points to present to the voters in terms of taxpayer concerns.
So on that question, you were doing the 18 million bond. Were you doing the 1,000 per pupil levy?
We were doing the 1,000 per pupil
Okay.
levy and the 500 per pupil levy. Both of those were asked separately. And then this question was phrased in terms of, suppose that the bond referendum were placed on the ballot, that we've been discussing, and an operating levy also, as we were discussing.
Okay.
What would be your action? What would you do? So again, we have to factor in the folks that were reacting to the potential of that $1,000 per pupil unit proposal. Now, what's the most effective source of information? And this doesn't necessarily mean the primary source of information about the school district. This was asked in terms of, okay, if the referendum election were to take place, what would be the most effective way of you receiving information? The number one way at 45% was a mail brochure or newsletter. This district has always been very fond of print. And although we're now in the electronic age, there are just areas of the state, and also as a respondent on a couple of surveys myself, the importance of the mail brochure or the newsletter cannot be understated in the school district. The district website ranks next at 26%, so you have two communication sources that would reach 71% of the folks out there. After that, school public meetings were indicated by 8%, email by 6%, local newspapers at 3%, but also keep in mind this wasn't asked in terms of what's your principal source of information, it's what's the most effective way of getting the information to you. School flyers at 4%, and then the grapevine, which has always been in our surveys out here alive and well and lush at 5%. So, the two major sources, though, that people will tend to rely upon are the mail brochure and newsletter and the district website. And again, we ask them to choose one source of information. So several others of these could also be secondary sources. Now, one thing that we've been finding across the state of Minnesota is that for whatever reasons, and part of it is what's going on in Washington, part of it's what's going on in St. Paul, part of it also is just the aftershock from last November's election, that we have turnout rates all over the board. And in most cases, the turnout rates are not in favor of the groups that we would normally associate being supportive of school districts. So, for example, if we take a look at the first chart for a moment, less than 10-year residents, if we have an overall projected turnout of 37%, which is a little bit on the high side. Normally we would expect to see that at about 33%, but for whatever reason, there seems to be more interest going on in school district after school district. You can see that both the less than 5-year residents and the 5 to 10-year residents fall below the general turnout line of 37%. If we continue down, the 18 to 34-year-olds, with a 37% general turnout, they're at 20%, about half. And that's what we're finding right across Minnesota currently. Preschool households, that is households that are containing preschoolers or infants, at 25%. School district student households at 32%, again lower than the overall norm. If we keep going on that, having a relative in the Forest Lake Area School District comes in a little bit higher at 43, but it's not unusual, and in fact we're finding this right across the entire area, that preschool households and public school student households are just not as motivated as they should be at this point in time. Now, moving on in terms of turnout rates. The under $150,000 homes is less than the 37%. If we take a look at the city of Forest Lake, that kind of stands out at 26%. That's 11% lower than the general turnout elsewhere. Women are more likely to turn out than men, not a surprise. Community education users, though, who are generally far more motivated than the general, are turning out at less than that 37%. And then finally, if we take a look at party identification, which was also asked, we have Republicans at about the general turnout level, Democrats somewhat more motivated, and independents much less, 7% less than that total turnout level. That's one of the reasons why, in looking at this and in putting together that probability of success chart, there's a lot of turnout that just isn't there. Now, does that mean that's necessarily going to be the case? No. And certainly, we're advising all of our districts that they're going to have to watch that, and in particular, any grassroots campaigns or volunteer campaigns will certainly need to keep in mind that the turnout coming into this election is much more currently opposed to referenda than it is historically in favor. And we're seeing this right across the board. Edina the same way, Bloomington the same way, South Washington County, one of your close by districts the same way. All of them are in this general position. It's one of the, probably, in summary, in terms of just talking about the turnout for a moment, we had to go back 18 years to find a similar situation. And that was in 1999, and it was with a very different governor at the time, for those of you that might remember back that far.
No, I forgot my question here. I was just going to ask you. Oh, early voting. Does that enter into this at all? Because early voting has certainly played a factor in elections lately.
It has been. We can't, though, project in terms of asking a person, would you be inclined to early vote? It's called a halo effect question.
Oh.
Folks would basically, they want to be on the side of the angels. They would say, well, of course I would. Just tell me how. So as a result, that's one of the things that we are recommending to every one of our referendum clients, to take a look at early voting and absentee ballots.
Okay.
So in general, then, what can we say? Well, first, the district, in terms of general perceptions, is outstanding. The impact of the bond referendum, which in a lot of other districts would have tended to drive perceptions down as people suddenly saw tax statements, hasn't occurred here. by and large, the same problems that people specified 2 years ago and what they liked most about the district 2 years ago are the same. So your key strengths, again, are still the same as they were going into the 2015 referendum. If we take a look, though, at fiscal aspects in terms of taxes, in terms of willingness to support a tax increase for various purposes, it's a much more cautionary environment this time. It's very different from what we had in 2015 at this point. And again, in part, it may be a result of the recency of having a successful referendum, but it also has a lot to do with what we're finding right across Minnesota, just a general increase in hostility toward tax increases. Now, is a referendum doable? That's generally the first question that I'm asked. Absolutely. But it's going to have to be very, very carefully constructed, keeping in mind that there's hesitancy this year among a lot of folks, and that your supporters, the general supporters from the past, are not all as engaged or motivated as they were in the past. What's the probability? Well, I've already told you that. My goodness, in comparison to the two districts where we had to indicate, no, this is not a good time to go, the probability in the one case was 20%, the probability in the other case was 22%. So as a result, there's still residual fondness of the district. The district is still viewed as being a good school district. And certainly what's helping things is all of the construction going on with respect to facilities. But we have to also keep in mind that this is going to be more of a challenge than what we faced in 2015. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, is the typical reach out method dialing landlines?
No, we use random digit dialing. So consequently, we have landline-only households, we have cellular-only households, and we have the combination households. We do keep track of that. It takes longer, though, for us because obviously we have to screen for location. But nevertheless, we're able to, this is probably boring you with way too much information, but we're able to not only track cell phones, but we can track numbers, blocks of numbers in terms of what the closest tower is that they would be using. And that certainly helps us. The only group that we're not able to include in the survey, unfortunately it is not that big of a bias, is folks that may be living in the district that didn't change their cell phone area code. And so consequently, if they still have, let's say, a St. Louis area code, we're not going to be able to contact them. But that's generally less than 2%, according to the statistics we have from the cellular phone companies.
Thanks.
So is it fair to say that the favorability or the probability for both the levy and the bond are fairly equal?
You're in a position where the number of folks that are going with one is equal to the number of folks that are going with the other. Yeah, that would be a very fair statement to make.
Okay, thank you.
So the questions, you could not ask if they had children in the district at all, could you? Was that one of your criteria at all?
I'm sorry?
To know if they had children in the district? If
Oh,
they had
yes.
School-age children?
Yes, you
Okay,
can
that
ask
was part of it. And was it, what's the percentage did you have?
I believe it was,
Was it? Was it part of it? I totally missed it.
On page 6.
I just wondered the percentage
35%.
of them had students in the
And
district.
6% are using other public open enrollment, whether it be
Oh, that's
private,
good.
charter, or homeschooling.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if I could respond further to your question, we actually had 10% of households who were landline only, 40% who were cellular home only, and both land and cell at 50%.
Did you find yourself doing a lot of educating to get them to understand the difference between bond and levy, and do you think they have a grasp of that?
We poll on that all the time. And most people really don't understand why you can't use part of the bond referendum funds on operating expenses. So that, again, is something that needs to be clarified for the people. But we've also seen that by harping on that and keeping that almost as a motto for the district over a year or two, again, most people just aren't paying attention. So the roughest terrain then, in terms of coming back with a referendum, is where you've just had a bond referendum, and you're coming back now for an operating levy, with people saying, well, didn't we just give you $150 million? And why can't you use it? So there's an educational process involved, I think, as you go forward.
You used a variable with 500 and 1,000 and somewhere in between. For the 18 million, did you do that, or did you just stick with the 18 million?
We just stuck with the 18 million on that.
So if that was less, that would just change it.
Absolutely. People were indicating to us why they were no, and in fact, it was the cost. It was the 18 million.
Okay, thank you.
I had one more question on page 6 when you did the summary. And this could be insignificant, but you addressed it in other ones. 6% were unsure. Is that high or low compared to other surveys? Yeah, the last one, the last graph, pie chart. So on the bottom, it has 6% unsure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have page 6 is the financial management question.
That's because we have multiple slides on a sheet.
Oh, yeah. So it's the bond and operating.
So it's a
levy.
bond and operating. You called it your summary.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, the 6% unsure?
Sorry to make you dig. Yeah.
No problem. The 6% uncertainty is about the norm right now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually are finding that you have in any referendum situation right across Minnesota, you've got roughly 90% who are indicating they are either in favor or opposed. So that could run as high as 10, and in some cases it goes as low as 3.
Okay. So we're right in the middle. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question on, I know you have that same slide, but we were looking at if you went for the levy and the bond contingent on the levy question, having 2 questions. But what do you think of success on those? When you have one contingent on the other, does it affect them voting no on both? Or, I mean, with the climate that you see in our district?
It's been our experience when you have a operating levy and you've got a bond referendum. The bond referendum, there's a natural tendency for some people to want to vote for the lower tax increase. Now, in a lot of areas, that means that the bond referendum will in fact not raise taxes as much as the operating levy will. And what we generally recommend, and I think on the basis of what we're seeing here, I would recommend making the bond referendum contingent on the operating levy. If in fact there are operating funds that you're looking for in order to utilize those facilities as effectively and efficiently as you can.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, that's good.
You also had, where do people get their information? We're a brochure mail type of clientele. I know myself, newspapers play a big part in how they present the information. And so I think a combination of the two, you know, if we send out great brochures and the paper comes out and, you know, just doesn't have the same kind of feeling, that would affect it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that question is worded in terms of what's the most effective way for you to receive information about the referendum.
Okay, so they're looking at more detailed information there. And then, okay, thank you.
But as we found in the survey 2 years ago, and I have no reason to suspect there have been major changes, letters to the editor and editorials play a very, very key role.
And they sell newspapers.
All right, any further questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I always appreciate appreciate the work you guys have done for us. It's
Excellent.
gives us kind of an insight that we would not otherwise have. And I know you come into this with just a wealth of practical experience as well, and we appreciate that you bring that to us as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We really enjoy working with you. Our owners, really, we have ratings within the company in terms of where's the friendliest school district statewide. And Forest Lake is always ranked in the top 4. Very, very few hang-ups, very, very few people unwilling to talk to us. So as a result, I wouldn't call you an easy district because there are a lot of people who aren't home at any particular point in time. So we find that we have to make 5, 6, 7, or 8 recalls in order to get a targeted household. But nevertheless, it's always been a joy for our phoners. And needless to say, I'm not going to comment on the districts in which we get groans from our phoners. But we enjoy working with you, and we wish you well.
Thank you so much.
Great.
That was excellent.
All right, well, let's continue our discussion then. I think I'll first just figure out where people are at with the bond portion. Jeff, if you want to start out just kind of talking about the recommendation of the committee.
Yeah, the task force came in at a recommendation of $9 million for that bond proposal.
And can you talk a little bit about what then that included?
It was a lot around the athletic competition field out there and facilities surrounding that and tennis courts, etc. Yeah, that's primarily what it was.
Okay. Do people want to go around and just kind of talk about their thoughts on the bond portion? Anybody want to start?
I'll start. I definitely think it's needed. I like that $9 million spot. I know in the packet that we had here for our review and comment kind of detailed out what that $9 million would include, and it touches a wide range of things. It's not just athletics or not just arts. It's a wide range of facilities that would touch quite a few of our students. I'm kind of against making it contingent just because we need both. And if one passes and one doesn't, we're not going away. We're coming back, and we're going to come back, and we're going to come back because we have to have both. And if I don't want to turn my nose up at people that are willing to get those fixes in right now, if that's what they're willing to support right now. So I would lean towards just having both of them out there, assuming I'm operating under the assumption that we're going to have one of each out there. So that's kind of where I'm sitting currently, is the $9 million spot and not contingent on the levy.
Okay, thank you. Tyson?
Well, I'm kind of in agreement with Member Odegaard that I like that 9 million spot. I think that, I feel like we hit rock bottom with our severe cuts again. So the levy to me is really necessary, absolutely. But, we hit rock bottom, but we bounced off a little with our bond. And there's been so much positive momentum and interest. I still have people asking me when things are going to be finished, asking me when we're going to have, the bleachers will be handicapped accessible. The tennis booster moms are still starting conversations with me about, this needs to be fixed. I honestly feel like we have been doing so much educating with our community and our parents that if we were to just drop the idea of the bond right now, because we so need the levy, that we just lose a lot of time and lose a lot of backtracking, having to re-message, do some of that educating on the bond and levy dollars and that how they're so different. So I'm with Member Odegaard. I'd really like to see both on. I'm still trying to decide about that contingent with the second question. So, but definitely the levy is the huge need, but I feel that the bond, we really need to finish this work.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Member Corcoran?
I struggle with the whole bond idea. I mean, believe me, I want it as much as everybody, but I'm totally concerned about the levy. And people I've talked to have been, you know, they really want the money in the schools, like I do. We've waited a long time for the sports, and believe me, I'm all for that too, but I'm kind of not in support of doing a bond right now. I just think we need to focus on getting money in our schools. I mean, I know this stuff isn't going to go away, but I'd like to see everything else done, see where we're at, and maybe we can get all facilities. Maybe we have other potential down the road, but we don't even know what we have yet. So I think people would understand the levy, getting money in the schools, but I don't know if they're going to want to spend money on a bond right now. I just, the people I've talked to just kind of want to see everything done first and then see how it goes. So that's where I'm at.
All right, thank you. For my part, I think that the things that are kind of covered under that 9 million are, I mean, there are things that we've been talking about needing to get fixed for a long time. I don't think the 9 million is it's not a big ask, but the things that it's trying to fix, I think are really important, and I think that we've grown so used to that stadium being in the bad condition and just it just doesn't support what we want to do with our activities in any way. And I think we've kind of grown used to it in many ways, but the people that use it know that it needs that improvement. And so I'm 100% behind that 9 million. I think we need that bond. I feel like if we say we're not going to do the bond, it's kind of letting down the people that supported the entire bond last time. And last time we said there was an important need for those facilities. I think that important need is still there. I am not in favor of it being contingent, and that's different than what I've said for the rest of the time I've been on the board on these things. And the reason I'm changing my mind is that I feel like we've built up a little bit of bad blood because we've always made those extra things contingent on the major bond, and I think people rightly feel like we've thrown those things under the bus. And I think that for me, I think maybe this is the time to say we're not going to make them. I just kind of feel like making them contingent is kind of like saying, well, we've got a sacrificial lamb, something that people can throw away. And I don't think with a $9 million bond, it's not that much. I don't think that's, I don't know. I'd be curious what other people say, but for me, I don't think we need to go contingent on this one. I think the difference between the two is so large that I would be in favor of not making it contingent. But that's my take.
I am comfortable with the 9 million. I think we need to move forward with the momentum that we currently have, with what the task force has directed us to do, and with the results from Morris Leatherman, and move forward and ask for the 9 million bond. I'm not certain if we should make it contingent or not, so I need to think about that a little bit more.
So I too am in favor of the $9 million bond. I think the picture in the newspaper here several weeks ago of the tennis courts really, sort of explains to the community exactly where we're at with that money. I don't think the $9 million is too much to ask for. It's significantly reduced from what we asked for in the last bond to do all those improvements. And I think Member Odegaard makes a great point about not tying them together. And in the past, I too would have been in favor of tying one to the other, but think that either way, we need both of them. There's no one isn't needed, so we'll make it the sacrificial lamb. They're both desperately needed, so I guess that's where I would be at.
Member Moorhead?
Well,
the 9 million would be what I would think we would have to do if we're gonna fulfill any of the promises and fix the things that we need for facilities outside this. And I'm just wondering, we went 18 because that was a previous number. I mean, I would have really liked to seen a smaller number for that bond, but just knowing that that would make a difference in the survey as well, if they were presented with an 18 million and now it's a 9 million. But I'm big on how much is it a month, and so you have to explain to me, Mr. Martini, if you could, if we don't have it contingent on one another, in the past we have, and it's this much a month for this and this for that, how would we tie the two together and make that easy for people to understand? Because I think that's.
I think Dr. Massey has a handout for you. On the impacts, 500, 750, or 1,000. And on bonding, the tax impact is not linear like it is on an operating levy, so we have figures for a $250,000.
And you could combine the two so that I could tell folks out there, if your house is 250,000, this is what it would be for the two of them per month.
We certainly do.
Okay.
But let me break your answer down for just those bonding questions. I can give you how much a month for a $250,000 home, the 9 million bond is, and the 18 million bond. $9 million bond, $250,000 home. Remember, it's businesses a little bit harder than homes. It's 92 cents a month. 92 cents a month for 9 million. 18 million is $3.67. So operating referenda are a little more expensive.
So, again, that would be great, because that would be including my question. They don't care which one does what. They want to know, how much am I going to pay more a month?
On the sheet that you have, if you write down $250,000 home, 92 cents a month, 9 million. And you write another line, $250,000 home, $3.67 a month, $3.67 a month, 18 million bond. That answers the question for all your possible permutations and combinations. Would it not?
Yeah.
Yes, it would.
Can you repeat that, Larry?
And I'd like to thank the teachers who made it possible for me to add that on that sheet of paper.
I didn't hear what you
So
said.
a $9 million bond would be another 92 cents per month. And an $18 million bond would be $3.67.
And so I don't even have to know that number.
And
I
so-
want to, because I'm not talking about 18 million in my brain.
Because this is 100, yeah.
I'm talking about now adding that to the levy.
That we already have.
92 cents a month. At
That's
9
including
million.
the levy.
And the levy is the last line pre-printed on
Okay.
that sheet.
Okay, so that's what we add together. And forget the 18 million in my mind. I'm not going 18 million. The highest I would go is 9.
But I wanted you to have a tool so that you can do all the combinations.
As you always do, it's great. Appreciate that.
I would point out on the sheet that those monthly figures on the operating is based on $100 or $100,000 home value. So you'd have to extrapolate that out to 200 or 250. And as Director Martini said, that's linear.
It's linear for business properties and homes on the operating levy. It's not that way for bonding. So $200,000 home is double that figure.
Right.
And unfortunately, you have to pull out your half. So 2.5 times the figure there if you want $250,000.
Well, last time I had to pull out someone's tax information, because all you hear in the paper or when we talk about it is the millions. And he wanted me to know how much, look up my tax, how much am I going to be? And when I told him it was $12 a month, he went, "What's all the excitement about?" I said, "Well, see, that's it, because people look at the millions, and that's how it's reported, and they think they're kind of paying most of that for some reason." So I appreciate when I can tell them how much a month for the general houses, 250, and then they can go in and get their actual figure.
And we'll put together the tax calculators once a decision is reached and have those available for folks.
So I
They
guess-
just plug in their value on the website.
Going back, then I would think that I wouldn't necessarily have to have them separate. I agree that we actually need both of them, and I see some value in letting them know that. and, but mine would be the 9 million tops. Are we going on the other one too, how much we think?
Yeah, I thought we'd just talk about the bond, because it's easy to wrap our hands around, our head around. And so it sounds like we have some consensus on the 9 million. Member Corcoran, you're not comfortable with going out for that.
No.
And on contingency, we were kind of mixed on that.
You know, I'm kind of starting to change, because Member Moorhead makes a great point, and Rob, you made an excellent point that, you know, we'd be kind of remiss in not, you know, making one seem lesser than the other. I mean, even though the levy is really the utmost importance, we still need to finish these projects. These other folks, these other pieces, they need to be, people have been waiting. I feel like could really be letting people down and constituents in my areas if we just did the 2 question as contingent, did the sacrificial lamb. So
yeah, I'm not 100%. I mean, I'm not super strong about it, but it's just kind of a feeling I have. Remember, Olson, you you weren't sure about the contingency.
Yeah, I like what Luke said, and then everyone else has added something to that, so I could get on that.
Okay.
Not contingent. Yep.
Member Corcoran, you're out on the 9 million, even after finding out it's only a buck, under a buck a month.
I know. I just, the people I've talked to, it's like the history that I've seen, I just think people will vote for one, but I don't know if they'll vote for both. And I feel like we're not. It just wouldn't be the right thing to not get this levy passed. I mean, we're so critical for our staffing and our money in our schools. We're gonna have these buildings with no one in there to teach. I mean, I'm really concerned. So I don't know if I can get on board with it ever. So
did you feel that the information provided tonight in the survey?
It's fine. I've lived here a long time, and I've seen how things work around here for over 30 years. So I just know that we've had 2 questions, one will pass. I mean, it's just been the history. If you look at the past histories, all the years past. Has there ever been a time when 2 questions passed?
Oh, I can't remember that, but then
Ever?
Excuse me.
So,
Are you saying then combining them wouldn't be attractive to you either, because that in fact would include people who have been waiting for
I know
the track, and also people who know the importance of the levy. I kind of think that's what made my mind switch, because, and especially looking at the amount of money to get these things fixed. We have great facilities now. We're so grateful to our community, and then we can't even have a track meet. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. And so I see that as kind of like an extension or a finishing up of what we have. And
I'd just like to see how in all facilities we could definitely get on board with that, and then we wouldn't have to even, it could be a moot point. So that's another thing we could think about, you know? So, and see where we're at the end of our bond. Maybe they'll, you know, some things will be changed by then. So I guess I don't know.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we move on to the operating levy and see what people think. Member Corcoran, you want to start?
I'm thinking the 750. I think that was showed that would be supported pretty close to the 50%. And so our other operating levies going away in 2 years, I believe. So so with that, my question is, with that 750 plus our existing, then would that be renewed to be going forward after the 2 years of the other one ending?
The motion that we, did you want to?
Well, I was going to answer that question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I need to understand that piece.
The vast majority of our current operating levy, we basically have the ultimate authority over anyway.
Yeah.
There's a little bit extra that we've got right now. Most of it is state equity funding, and then what is it, $300 per student that we have authority over, which is basically our operating levy right now. So even if it expires in 2 years, it doesn't really expire.
We'll still get that additional to the 750.
And then this would be on top of that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So the motion that we've kind of put together, that we've kind of been using as a framework, that it's a revoke and renew.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sound right?
That's right. So at the current amount, plus 750
Right, that's what I think.
would be the 18 something figure that's included in the document that you have.
Okay, yep, so I think that would be,
Yeah.
thank you.
My opinion, I think that, you know, this is an operating levy for me. It's just it's a critical thing for what we want to do. I mean, over the years, when we've been cutting back, you've seen the state funding not keeping up, and I've done my share of complaining about that. But given that it's where it's at, then I think for us, we need to make up that difference, because I think, you know, when you look at the survey and when they're talking about academics and good teachers, those are two things that I feel are directly related to that kind of operating money that we have. And if we keep ratcheting that down and ratcheting that down and ratcheting it down, those kids that are struggling, those kids that need the advanced, or not need, but need those advanced classes, they suffer, you know? And when you take those both ends like that, and then you look at what we've done a really good job with, which is giving everybody a set of options that helps them be successful. You know, having strong ag, strong science, all those things like that. Those are the things that suffer when you cut back, right? And so I just feel like, you know, being able to put as much money as possible towards this number is gonna put us in a financially stable place where we can keep doing well what we do well, which is academics and offerings for kids, right? And so, you know, I would say $1,000, but we're not gonna pass it.
Right.
Right?
That's exactly, I know.
You know, and,
1,500.
but it looks like 750 has a probability that's within the range I think that we can live with. And so I'm gonna stand behind the 750 because I think it's a number that gets us where we want to be, so we're, you know, financially stable, long-term, and but which is in the realm of possibility too. We're not in a district where we can ask for crazy money or ask for something that what my daughter would call extra, right? And so that, and I think 750 is that number for me. So, Member Olson?
Well, with what Morris Leatherman has given us, I'm definitely more comfortable with the 500. But they did make it sound like 750 is doable as long as we have aggressive communication. And I think parents really want to know what specifically, I mean, the bond is laid out, here's what we would get with that $9 million. But we need to be just as specific as to what we're going to do with that money to the parents so that we can communicate that. So if we can do that, I would be on board with the 750.
Well, I don't think it's rocket science that we've been cutting ridiculous things like the $15,000 in aid for homeless families and janitorial supplies, and effectively all of our staff has been taking between a 1.5% and 2% pay cut every year as they get a 1% raise and inflation is 2.5% or 3.5%. We're no longer retaining some of our best teachers, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I would love to say $1,000, but it's clear that we wouldn't pass it. So I absolutely will support $750.
Well, I'm coming in, of course, as I usually do, the low ball, because I think 500 would be a much better chance, and especially if we want both things to pass, I want my very best chance to do that. And, you know, I could be, after listening to all of you, maybe persuaded to the 750, but I really want us to think seriously about, we want the momentum that we have to stay, we want a positive thing to go forward, we want this thing to pass, we don't want to go out and have a failure. So I was hoping that maybe the 500 would be more palatable to everyone, because it did seem like there was a strong chance of that passing. So, and that tax impact would be one that I think would be very easy to go out and talk to people. Do we think we need more? I brought in a paper that I'm going to make copies of, because I've been on this board a long time, and I've worked with many good people, even before Larry Martini, who held our feet to the fire. We have never been able to spend what it takes to do the job we do. And how do we accomplish it? It'll say in this article over and over again, it's our people work harder and do more. They don't have all the extra people. And so Frugality in Forest Lake in 1993 was the big article in the Pioneer Press. We could write the same article today. And I think that's what we have to convince the folks of. Someone just asked me, as a conservative, how can I go on spending for schools as much as we do? And I said, it isn't that we spend for schools, it's how do we spend the money on the schools. And this proves to me that we do it in the right way. And we can't say that often enough. And it's time and time again proven by people who have gone through our budgets and gone through, so we have nothing to be ashamed of when we're talking about needing the money. So I'm going to make articles on this for everybody to have. I think it's great information in 1993, and it could be written today. So that being said, I still would like an assurance on my part that we are doing the best job we can of passing it and looking at the 500 and the 9 million, but it's just my little speech, and I'll certainly want to fill in with what the rest of you think is your logic.
If there was a number higher than 1,000 on our sheet, that would be the one I would support. Pre-survey results, I understand that we need to be realistic as well. 500 doesn't cut it, not even close. 750 is toeing the line of not quite cutting it, but like I said, we need to be realistic. So that's what seems where the group is kind of trending towards. So that's kind of where I'll land as well. But it's not just about we have to have it pass. It's about we can't come back to our voters in 3 years when $500 per student is gone and say, okay, we need another 500 now. That's not an option. So we've got to lock in an amount that will allow us to kind of bring back some of the programming and things that Member Peterson mentioned that we lost. Try to start to shore up our salary schedules so we quit bleeding competent staff that keep bleeding for $15,000, $18,000, $20,000 a year for doing the same job. And then try to address some class size issues that we're starting to see creep up each year with all these cuts. 500 does not get us close to that. 750, I think is a decent compromise. 1,000 would be better, but I'll come in at 750.
Well, I agree.
Bring us together, Member Tyson.
Oh, here we go. I just feel like we need some breathing room, and 1,000 would do that. And we need long-term stability, and we have amazing teachers, and they are leaving us in droves, and it is sad. We need to really focus on that teacher retention and get this to where we're stable. So I would love 1,000, but after hearing this information tonight from Morris Leatherman, that the good probability with the 750, and I agree with Member Olson wholeheartedly, we need to carefully construct the message. And so I'm for the 750. I think that sounds where we're trending. And I think it sounds like that, with this great information, really would work.
Okay. Then I have one more question. How do people feel about the number of years on the levy? Just a little bit of history. And we both go back a ways, but it seemed like we were having bonds that were shorter, or levies that were shorter duration, and so that we were constantly in trying to pass the levy. It's running out, and then on this last one, we passed it for 8 years, and that gave us a comfortable margin where we could get that, live with it for a while, and I thought it was a good way to go. But does that sound right with the history? So now we've got this levy, we need to decide how long we want it to be for. Personally, and as I was reminded, 10 years maximum on these levies. So anybody want to start with what they think?
You know what, I forgot one thing, Member Chair. I'd like to hear what our superintendent, some of his thoughts, if he wouldn't mind, on what his reflections are on our survey and what we're trying to decide.
Yeah, I certainly have put a lot of thought and energy into processing this through. I've shared many of those thoughts with you through my various communications with you over the last couple of weeks. First of all, before Bill leaves, I want to thank Bill for some noble work here and
Thank you, Bill.
some wonderful information
Thank
for
you.
us. Thank you, Bill. I think it's been well articulated that we have significant financial needs in this district. We are on a trend of working with less and less and less, and we need to stem that tide. 500, in my estimation, gives us a sigh of relief. It doesn't allow us to address some of the critical needs that we have. 750 does, to a much greater extent. I think, as has been articulated here, our attracting and retaining our staff is a significant issue. Addressing class size is a significant issue. Shoring up resources and programs for the education of work in this district is a critical need. 750 allows us to address those various pieces in a much more significant way than 500 would be. As it relates to the bond and for arts and athletics, I do think those are the missing pieces that bring this district together and take us into the future with our pieces shored up. Operating those bond pieces are the missing links. And if we can shore those up, there's no telling where we can take the district. I think $9 million gives us what we need to address those critical needs. And, I really defer to the discussion around the table on how the wisdom of tying them together. I think you can make an argument both ways to tie them together. So, again, I would defer to your judgment on that. Both are critical needs. I don't think we can argue that facilities is less of is not a need. It certainly is a need. Member Corcoran, I think you've been eloquent on the point of operating is an absolutely critical component for us. I think that's been well articulated as well.
Thank you. So what I've got is,
We need to talk about duration.
oh, I'm sorry. Absolutely. So I kind of started anyway. I think, to me, I'd like to go 10 years. Oh, I'm sorry, Member Moorhead?
Oh, that's all right.
You've got your pencil raised?
I did. When we talked many years, 5 was way too short. All we did was pass and come back and pass and come back. Or not pass and come back, but the reasoning that 10 just seemed to be like longer. 8 just seemed comfortable with people for some reason. And
Can see that.
I would be just fine with continuing the 8.
I'm good with 8, 9, or 10. I think any less than that, and it's exactly right. You have a year or two, and then you're starting to plan for the next one already. So any one of those numbers I'd be totally fine with, but 8 definitely.
I'd like to go with 8, and I think that for consistency's sake and switching lots of things up, people can just get those red flags going. So I'd like to be 8.
That's a good point.
8 or 10 is fine with me.
The roll goals?
I was gonna say for sure 10, but now rethinking about it, I would probably be more comfortable with 8.
8 or 10.
Okay, so 8?
Seems like 8. I think Member Tyson had a great point, because again, we can say it's, it was like last time 8,
Yeah.
and if we have to start going, this time we want 10, it's like, well, next time you're gonna want 12. I mean, I think just keeping the same number is some sort of stability there.
Okay. I mean, I'd be fine with 8. I mean, it doesn't sound like people are firm on 10, so that sound right? Okay, so why don't we, so this is a resolution that admin put together for us. The numbers are already in there at $9,750,000. They were just kind of guessing. So I'm going to pass that out, and then I'm going to say let's take a little break, and when we come back, we'll put a motion on the table. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to talk and hand things out at the same time. I can't do that.
So we're taking a
I
break.
think you've already done it.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
That's right here.
Okay.
I've been
And
staring
then,
at it
so
all
let's
night.
take a little break. We'll come back at 10 minutes.
I just want to follow through. Didn't I? Did you see it?
You want me to start off with a motion? All right, I would like to move.
I thought we were gonna have discussion on that other point, or is that later?
Later.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll have a discussion after the motion.
Okay.
We're good? All right, I would like to move that we adopt the resolution as written, which is an additional $750 of levy for a period of 8 years and a $9 million bond. Neither question contingent on the other.
All right, do we have a second?
Second?
All right. Discussion.
Well, like I said, I kind of wavered on this whole thing because I was on the 500, realizing the need is the 750. So I'm going to go there and just hope and pray that we can pass this. I was also wavering on whether it's contingent or not. I was always thinking no, because we need the one, but I think in this particular case, we're losing money by not having the facilities taken care of. We cannot have meets, which brings in a lot of people, and it's been long overdue waiting for the kids to be able to have those facilities that they need. So to me, tying them together now makes sense, because to me, in my mind, they're both needed, and I don't want to come back in another year or two and say, we haven't fixed this yet, and so we have to come back. So that's kind of where my reasoning was on agreeing with this resolution.
Okay. Member Odegaard?
I don't have anything to add from my earlier comments from our prior discussions, so yep, I'm good.
I don't have anything to add previously, but I do want to say that I'm going non-contingent, just because, the reality of finishing the projects and getting the levy increase, we can have some breathing room and just have this finished off for the next 8 years. I feel like there's too many people that have been waiting for pieces of this to come together, and just not moving forward would just be like letting that group down, and I'm just so looking forward to everything being completed.
Member Corcoran?
Can I pass to the end?
Yes. And just, for my part, I just want to say that I've been so fortunate in my life to have been able, I'm a software engineer, and I work at some company somewhere, and I've been very fortunate that I've been able to see the inside of these schools at a level that a lot of times people don't have the ability to do. And so that, for me, this kind of a thing is so obvious, because I see the great work that our employees do, and the great work that our students do, and the parents that are involved, and I'm able to see that up close. And so to me, these kind of things are really obvious, because I also see at the same time that our funding from the state oftentimes works against that mission. And so I see how important that mission is, the big difference it makes in kids' lives. And then I see that the the stinginess that comes from the state. And so I see something like this, and this is a chance for us as a community to say, that's not good enough. We need to do right by our mission to educate our kids. We need to stay competitive. We need to make our facilities, whether activities or a building or whatever it is, we need to make it modern and make it right. And so, to me, I think these are some good numbers. I think they're numbers that are acceptable, that can be acceptable to the public if we're good at speaking about what we've seen and how this kind of money is used. And then the other thing too is that we've got a darn good record so far with the money that the public gave us for the facilities bond. We've shown that we spend that money right. We did very good planning up front. We did not go overboard on anything, but the things we're doing right? And it's stuff that supports our academic mission. And so we've got a strong track record of using this money right. And so I think we've got to get that message out to the public, but I think these are numbers that are acceptable when that message gets across. So I'm in support of it.
I'm also in support of it. I hope that through our marketing that we can advertise the one number for less than $25. You can vote yes for both. I mean, I don't really want us to focus on the 92 cents for the bond because that's pretty appetizing and doable. But if our marketing scheme can be, combined for this amount, you're going to get this, and this, and this, and this kind of thing is where I hope we would go with that.
So obviously I moved it, so I support it, right? But the one thing I'd like to point out is something I made in discussion with one of the people in the audience over there when we were on break, which is, I'm in a unique position here in that I have a 20-year-old daughter who came through this school and is now up in Superior going to college. And I have a 9-year-old son and one in between. And my 9-year-old is not getting the same education that my 20-year-old got. We don't have the ability because of the finances here to offer the things that were offered to my 20-year-old. And that ain't right. And it ain't right that the people whose children come up after my son will get even less if we don't do this.
Thank you. Member Moorhead?
I think I already spoke my piece. I started.
All right.
What we have.
Member Corcoran?
I'll just support what the board decides.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Rapheal?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Moorhead?
Aye.
Member Odegaard?
Aye.
Member Tyson?
Aye.
And Member Corcoran?
Aye.
All right, thank you. The motion passes. I'd like to thank the board for a fantastic discussion on this issue. All right.
And we're going to work ourselves off explaining. I sure hope so.
9.3, resolution establishing precincts, designating polling places, and designating hours for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide, county, or municipal election.
Thank you, Board President. Connie's been working really closely with the folks in Washington County, also checking in with Anoka County and Chisago County. And Anoka County is still going to have the multiple precincts at Lima Lakes. We're going to have one fewer precinct. I think the church down the road was not interested in assisting and being a polling place this time, so you'll see that reflected. But we would ask for your roll call resolution approval here.
All right.
Excuse
Do you have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
I have a question. So are you talking Forest Lake is one less? Where's
Yes,
the church down the road? I
It's
don't know.
listed in the document.
Oh,
Precincts are.
I didn't look at it yet.
So the Forest Lake precincts become Headwaters Service Center for Forest Lake P5, Hugo W2PA, Hugo W3PA. City Council chambers are for Forest Lake P2. Forest Lake Community Room is for Forest Lake P1, so that's one of those was somewhere else.
Faith Lutheran.
And Faith Lutheran is going to be Forest Lake P3 and Hosanna is P4.
Okay.
Any further discussion? There's no further discussion. Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Moorhead?
Aye.
Member Odegaard?
Aye.
Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Raphael?
Aye. Okay. Resolution passes. 9-4, approve review and comment submission to the Minnesota Department of Education.
Well, all school districts are required to propose projects exceeding $2 million in cost per site to the MDE for their comment. MDE has 60 days to advise the school district regarding those projects, and due to publishing requirements for that review and timing of the election, we need this item approved tonight. But you're welcome to modify anything in the document that you have before you.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the review and comment submission to the Minnesota Department of Education.
Move to approve 9.4.
Second?
Any discussion? There's no discussion. Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Moorhead?
Aye.
Member Odegaard?
Aye.
Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Raphael?
Aye.
And Member Olson votes aye.
Thank you. 9-5, determine school board liaisons to schools for 2017-2018.
So you'll see in your documentation on the information related to 9.5 where the various school liaisons were assigned last year based on your input and interest. And we do this annually, and the opportunity is here to either, of course, stay where you're at or modify or change to a different location. So we can work through each school. Do you want me to take care of that?
Sure.
Okay. So at Columbus, we have Gail and Luke identified there. So for 17-18, if you need a minute to look down the list to see where you might want to go, or if you already have done that and you have a sense, we can work our way down the list.
Okay. I'd like to,
Stay in Columbus. Sorry.
Okay.
I'd like to give or move from Columbus. I've been out there a couple of years.
Anybody
I'll
want to
take
pick up
Columbus.
Columbus? Joe, thank you. Forest Lake Elementary, we have Julie and Rob.
I'd like to move into the Forest Lake and Forest View if anybody wants to move.
Okay, I can move.
Julie, stay.
I'll stay.
Forest View Elementary, Julie and Rob.
Those are kind
Same
They're
thing, they're
together.
together.
Yeah. you're
Yeah,
right,
so it'd
thank
be
you.
me and
Yep.
Gail.
Those two schools stay together, Gail and Julie. Lino Lakes Elementary, Jeff and Joe.
I'd like to,
I would really like to go to Lino. If
it's my
somebody.
area, it better be nice.
I'll
Your
move.
neighbors, if you don't mind moving.
No.
Jeff's out, Karen in.
Karen and Jill.
I'd like to go to Lino. It's just all my neighbors. It helps me just stay in the loop, but
Okay, I'll give it up.
you sure?
Absolutely. I've been
I
there
don't want to make you.
many years.
It's been a long time.
Very good. So Karen and Gail to Lino Lakes. Linwood Elementary, Luke and Karen.
That one's hard for me to get to for some reason. I've not been a very good liaison out there, and a lot of their meetings conflict with this, so,
I can take them.
okay, that'd be
Okay,
great.
Rob, thank you.
I'll stay there.
And Luke, thank you. Rob and Luke. Scandia Elementary, Julie and Rob.
If someone wants to take that one, that'd be fine, or I'll stay with it.
Rob took Linwood, I can take that one.
Do you want Scandia, Karen?
Sure, Scandia to
I can stay
Lino.
in Scandia too.
Karen and Rob for Scandia. Wyoming Elementary, Gail and Jill.
I'll give up Wyoming for Jeff.
Thank you, Gail. I will
You're
gladly
welcome.
accept
That's
Wyoming.
insightful.
I gotta get on
Nice and
Twitter.
close.
Yeah, it's got too many social media for me. Twitter and
There
Twitter.
we go.
All right. Stay
So
focused.
Jeff and Jill?
Yep.
What are we on? Which one?
That's
Okay.
Wyoming Elementary, Jeff and Jill. CLC, ALC, Jeff and Karen.
I
And
can
CME as well.
go.
I can do that one.
All right, I'll give up.
Same here.
Oh, there you go. So Rob and Gail.
Because then I'm all in town.
Gail for CLC, ALC, and CME. Okay. Century Junior High, Karen and Gail.
fine with me. It's going to be kind of a combined, I would imagine now.
Yeah, so
Back and
we'll
forth.
include Southwest in this discussion. Can we do that? Okay? So Karen and Gail at Century and Luke and Gail at Southwest.
Okay, so we're gonna,
I think they should be combined.
The suggestion is to have the same group
Two
go to
people.
both schools.
Right. Yeah, that'd be consistent.
I'll take one of those slots.
we're on
Okay,
the
so
same
Luke,
one.
you're at Southwest now, and you'll jump to Century.
So I'll go off as Southwest then?
Karen, did you want to keep
Also,
it?
Gail.
I was,
No.
I think I have the senior high too. I'd rather have the senior high. But I think I was down for the senior high.
You're not in the senior.
Okay.
I would not be.
No,
Century
Julie and
is
Rob are.
Karen and Gail.
So right now at Century, it's Karen and Gail. Luke is on for Century and
That's
Southwest.
fine. I can.
Well, I can hop on board Southwest and Century.
Okay.
So Jill,
Oh, so Luke took my spot at Century and at Southwest.
Yeah.
does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay. So Luke and Jill for Century and Southwest. Okay, thank you. Senior High, Julie and Rob.
I'd like to stay on it.
I would like to get on there.
Senior
Boy,
year.
that's a solid
Like
act.
senior year kids.
We
We're
want
gonna
to
be on
keep
there,
track of
Jen.
Jim Caldwell over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jacqueline.
We all want that school.
We're gonna be hanging out.
Oh,
with
plus I
Jen.
have a child there, so.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
take
we
it.
have seniors.
I want to
on there.
report.
I just want to
Right.
come for lunch, so let me know when you're there.
Ranger.
Our kids wouldn't allow us to go.
So
for
Julie and,
And
Julie and Jeff
Yeah,
for
well,
Senior
That's
High.
why, no kids there.
See, you can go to Ranger Hour now. Listen.
Yeah, good.
Again, Julie and Jeff for the Senior High. Rob, you're off.
Yep.
Okay. Transportation, Karen and Jeff.
I want to stay there and be part of the new heart of the building.
And I can take the transportation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Karen and Rob for transportation. STEP program, Jeff and Jill.
What, don't?
I'd like to stay with Step.
I can,
I'll stay. I'll go.
Okay.
It's up to you. If you want it, I'll give it up.
you can stay.
Okay.
Jill and Jeff. Okay, thank you very much. That covers all the buildings.
All right, do we have
And
a
then-
motion to approve the new assignments?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
And then I just want to add, Member Chair, can this be posted on the website, the committees and the liaisons? Yeah, I think it usually is, but
Yes,
just to
we will.
confirm that.
Yep, under, we'll put that attached to your picture and your assignment.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
9.6, community use of school facilities policy 701.
I think that's where to go.
So with 701, this is back on the agenda in June. During the June school board meeting, Community Education Director Corey McKinnon provided an overview of the community use of school facilities policy 701. The policy, as you are aware, has been revised through researching facility use policies with other school districts and meeting with key stakeholders and users of our district facilities. The policy details all facets of facility use, including scheduling, priority, supervision, access, etc. You also have the related fee schedule for facility use as a reference in your materials, although tonight you're not approving the fee schedule, that's supporting information for this policy. So most significantly, the policy redefines and defines more clearly scheduling priority, access to facilities, and the fee structure is a significant modification as well. It's important to note that, as Director McKinnon pointed out through his presentation, that a community organization who uses the facility today, I'll use Flaw Basketball as an example. The rate they pay today will be roughly equivalent to the rate they'll pay under the new fee schedule. But it provides more flexibility for their use, especially if they want to generate different revenues and have access to run more tournaments. They'll find a more equitable or fair pricing structure for that. So a lot of detail in the policy that you've become familiar with related to scheduling priorities, access to facilities, and so on. So the other thing to point out is, of course, and this really doesn't change in this policy, but our district users, our basketball team, our volleyball team, our debate club will have, of course, first access during the school day for the facilities, and then the other groups will fall in line after that.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the community use of school facilities policy 701?
So moved.
Second?
So is Corey here?
Yes.
Oh, now, has there been any, I know you met with the, can you talk? Okay. You've talked to stakeholders a lot. Has there been anything that's came up in the recent conversations that you've had any issues with this policy?
No, I would say prior to my presentation, there was a couple questions that came up, and so I pulled that group together at the 11th hour, knowing full well, and they knew full well that this was going for presentation and then first reading on the June 22nd meeting and then approval tonight.
Okay.
We addressed some of those concerns and actually came out of that one with probably our strongest amount of consensus. But from that point till today, I haven't received a single email, phone call, or stop in the hallway regarding the policy.
Okay, I just want to make sure there wasn't anything
Yeah,
that has come
yeah,
up
that's a good
since the
question.
initial time, so.
Yeah.
Great, all right, I'm happy. Thanks so much, Corey.
And thank
Further
you.
discussion?
Just to thank him
Yeah, it's
because
a lot of work.
it's a conversation that's been long overdue, and to get this far is really a relief for everyone concerned, and thank you for gathering all the information and the people together.
A lot of work.
Yeah, Corey was well advised when he took the position not to take on this task.
I know.
And contrary to that advice, he took on a big task and has done a marvelous job putting a really solid policy together.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to add on to Member Moorhead that when I first came on the board, I was on Buildings and Grounds 6 years ago, and so this has had a lot of conversation, a lot of due diligence. It's kind of finally landed in a great spot, thanks to a lot of work by a lot of people, and thanks to Director McKinnon for wrapping it up and getting her done.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. It's a lot of good work.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Moorhead?
Aye.
Member Odegaard?
Aye.
Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Rapheal?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye, and Member Peterson.
Aye.
Okay. Policy is approved. All right, new business, 10-1, approved tax levy calendar. Director Martini.
Busy night for Director.
So it's exciting that we're just simply setting calendar, I bookended it with pictures and now calendar proposition. September 21st, we usually certify the maximum proposed property tax levy while the MDP is error correcting our data. We have until the end of September to certify the maximum. We're also proposing that you have December 7th at 6 p.m. as the hearing date for the truth in taxation hearing. That's after folks receive their notices, and if the tax increases are such, residents can come and ask questions, and we have currently had attendance other than you folks.
Yeah.
Were you looking for approval tonight?
No, simply first reading.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And review upcoming calendar dates. We got a lot coming up. And then, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Before we do, I just want to make mention that some things that we do that we never really report on are conferences that we attend. And I know at least 2 are going to the summer.
Oh, yeah. Summer
Yes,
session.
summer
And
session.
I would like that to put on the agenda sometime soon after they come back, because sometimes it's maybe months later and we haven't even talked about it, and who could remember back then. So I would just like, if they put the time into going, that they get a spot on the agenda to.
If somebody comes back from a conference and they want to speak on it, let's just talk to Connie about putting it into the reports and, not keeping it somewhat brief, but give a good overview. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, everyone.
The late number.